This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, May 13th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Across Europe, countries are allowing businesses to reopen, but health officials remain cautious about the risk for moving too quickly and allowing a resurgence of COVID-19 infections. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the top U.S. infectious disease expert, told a Senate committee Tuesday he is concerned that if states skip stages such as waiting for a 2-week decline in confirmed cases before opening up, there will be small spikes that might turn into outbreaks. The United States has the most confirmed coronavirus cases in the world, with almost 1.4 million and 82,000 deaths, followed by Russia with 232,000 cases. Russia has seen a spike in cases, including reporting more than 10,000 new cases on Wednesday. Now to North Africa, where Algerian Prime Minister Abdelaziz Jarrad says the country is extending its lockdown restrictions until May 29th to cope with rising COVID-19 infections. The North African country is reporting nearly 6,000 infections with 507 deaths and over 2,800 recoveries. South Africa's rand firmed in early trading on Wednesday as investors remained optimistic about chances for easing lockdown restrictions in some countries, despite concerns of increases in new coronavirus cases. Worldwide, there are nearly 4.3 million confirmed cases and 292,000 deaths, but almost 1.5 million people have recovered from COVID-19, according to Johns Hopkins University. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Tanzania has risen to more than 500, and critics are now going after authorities for their handling of the coronavirus pandemic and a lack of transparency. Charles Combe reports from Dar es Salaam.
Unlike other African cities, Tanzania's economic capital, Dar es Salaam, remains open for business, even though schools are closed and public gatherings prohibited. This has led some to criticize authorities for adopting comparatively weaker measures against the coronavirus and for not providing regular updates on infections. Fish trader Sajna Muhammad says with the government showing little concern, she's taking fewer precautions.
Many citizens are not getting proper information about coronavirus. You may hear that coronavirus no longer exists, but on this side, 2 people have died. On the other, 1 person is dead. I used to wear a mask properly, but now I just wear it on my ears because we didn't get information.
Tanzania's Opposition Alliance for Change and Transparency, ACT Party, has strongly criticized the government's handling of the pandemic as too secretive at the expense of public health.
If you don't provide updates, you are telling people that the problem is over. So people are no longer taking precautions. People continue with their business as usual. I have seen funerals of people where you have huge amount of people for funeral services, which is very dangerous.
Tanzania's government dismisses criticism of its lack of coronavirus infection updates.
We know we have diseases like high blood pressure, malaria, diabetes, HIV, and others that also kill. Let's leave the number of deaths to be provided by our experts.
Some citizens support the delay of information. They believe doing so reduces panic over the disease.
This issue of delaying of updates doesn't affect me in any way, and I see this as a good thing when they delay the updates. We live peacefully and do our business.
But battling coronavirus requires updated information, says a Tanzanian rights activist.
Our enemy is COVID-19. So at the moment, when we are trying to curb COVID-19, at the time we are trying to make sure there are no new infections, we should provide updates on time.
Meanwhile, Sagda continues selling fish so she can feed her family, knowing they are all in danger of contracting the virus. Charles Kombe for VOA News, Dar es Salaam.
The International Monetary Fund has approved $739 million in emergency financing to help Kenya respond to the economic shock caused by the coronavirus pandemic. The IMF predicts that the East African nation's economy will grow at the rate of 1%. However, analysts say the more Kenya borrows, the more its people are feeling the economic pinch. Mohammed Yusuf reports.
Kiptum Silas runs a small business. Since the beginning of the year, he has seen a significant drop in the number of customers patronizing his shop.
The business has been so low. There's nothing going on in town. There are no people. If there be some few people, maybe doing shopping on maybe food items, but not on phones.
Not far from Silas' shop, a few businesses are open, but very little is going on. Some have decided to shut down due to the COVID-19 pandemic and to avoid further losses. To limit the spread of the virus, Kenya has imposed a nighttime curfew and banned public gatherings. The virus has severely hurt the tourism and manufacturing sectors. Kenya is one of the African countries that has borrowed at least $4.5 billion from China to finance its 600-kilometer railway line. A loan that business people say has increased the cost of doing business.
We also have within the country a government that does engage a lot with the business community. We get involved a lot in the conversations around how we make some of these decisions. The hard part of it is the cost of doing business, which is a reality. We do have a very high wage bill as government and a lot of recurrent expenditure. And part of this has then meant that government has to raise revenue through a lot of fiscal measures that do impact the cost of doing business.
Some companies are trying to adopt the new measures, but others have had to close down their businesses.
In the 2020-2021 fiscal year, they actually projected that any additional revenues collected would go towards paying debts and paying pensions. So it means that even public services that would traditionally be implemented by government will now be scaled back because there's no money to implement those public services. And so everyone will be affected, particularly the majority of the poor.
It is for these reasons the IMF says it is ready to provide financial advice and support to Kenya to overcome the slow economic growth caused by COVID-19. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni says his government has worked diligently to keep coronavirus infections low. So far, the country has not recorded any deaths. In an exclusive interview with VOA affiliate NBS TV, Museveni, however, acknowledged that despite the successes in staving off the COVID-19, the disease has in many ways impacted Uganda and could potentially jeopardize the 2021 general election.
Well, if the virus can stop, like around June, we can have elections. What's the problem? If it stops like in June or what, you don't have to have a long campaign time. You don't have to.
And if it doesn't stop?
Of course, if it doesn't, it's very dangerous. You see countries which, that was one of the problems for Iran. They went on with the elections when the virus was already around, and they suffered. People gather. It's very dangerous. So if it can stop the virus, we can control it around June, even July. Elections are not a big issue. We can organize quickly. The only problem will be to have elections when the virus is still there. That will be the big problem.
So you're saying that if it is still there, it is possible that you can postpone the elections?
Of course, if it's there, it would be madness to say you go and people together. I don't think it will be wise.
That was Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni speaking exclusively to VOA affiliate NBS TV in Kampala. Critics of President Museveni say he is attempting to capitalize on COVID-19 fears to try and further entrench himself in power. For perspective, Africa 54's Paul Ndiho spoke to Mohamed Nsereko, an independent member of parliament for the Kampala Central Region.
Honorable Mohamed Nsereko, independent member of parliament for Kampala Central. Welcome to Africa 54.
Good day, and it's my pleasure to be here with you on Africa 54.
Oh, thank you so much. Right away, the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni said in an interview that to hold presidential elections are expected early next year amidst the coronavirus would be madness. Your immediate reaction?
I want to believe that is his opinion as a president or as a citizen of Uganda. I know he's not an ordinary citizen. But again, that goes back to the most important question. Who directs the Electoral Commission? That should have been a question posed to the Independent Electoral Commission of the Republic. And it should be the Independent Electoral Commission to decide on whether elections should be there or not, as advised by the health expert. But for the president to come out and clearly state that it would be madness, that brings into question as to whether the Independent Electoral Commission of Uganda is actually independent and firm. From the statements of the president, it is clear that it might not be independent as it seems. It might be independent on the face of it with the name, but not fully independent. By the time he makes a declaration as to whether elections will be there or not, in an election where he will be a candidate, that means he's the candidate and the judge. Either way, the answer is very simple. You're not the Independent Electoral Commission.
President Yoweri Museveni is being credited for having done a remarkable job when it comes to his fight against COVID-19. Uganda has had fewer cases, even in terms of death. I don't think Uganda has reported any death this far.
Well, we are not quarreling with success, and we are not saying that Uganda has not been partly successful so far as we walk this journey in the fight, just like many other countries have registered success. However, we can also come out to say that everything should follow the path of the rule of law. So you cannot use the issue of COVID to overstep your mandate or to abuse the laws of the Republic.
As a member of opposition, if you are to grade President Museveni, I've seen him, for example, for the first time in a long time, giving credit to the doctors, the nurses, the people who are on the front lines of COVID-19, giving them credit publicly. If you were to grade him, what grade would you give him?
Well, we welcome anything that is good. Of course, all over the world, health workers have done a tremendous job. The health workers have been the frontline soldiers without enough equipment but trying to save lives of people. I think it would have been terrible for him not to recognize that these people have done a tremendous job with 117 infections, no single death, and with very many recoveries. I would like to say we commend the job of health workers. They are saving lives of Ugandans. They are saving lives of people in the world, and they need a lot of credit. So I give him credit for that.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for hosting me.
That was Africa 54's Paul Ndiho speaking to Mohamed Nsereko, an independent member of parliament for the Kampala Central Region. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, Kenyan university students get help acquiring affordable laptop computers and continue studying during the COVID-19 restrictions. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Africa 54. U.S. lawmakers heard about the nation's response to COVID-19 from the nation's top health officials Tuesday, a panel that was moved online after concerns the White House is becoming a hotspot for the virus. More than 2 months into stay-at-home orders, lawmakers are considering yet another massive aid package to address the economic and public health crisis and to get the country running again. Here's VOA's Catherine Gibson.
As states around the nation begin to relax stay-at-home restrictions, lawmakers get a warning about the costs of failing to wait for a decrease in fatalities.
If some areas, cities, states, or what have you, jump over those various checkpoints and prematurely open up without having the capability of being able to respond effectively and efficiently, my concern is that we will start to see little spikes that might turn into outbreaks.
Even as protests spring up around the country calling for an end to restrictions, U.S. senators and health experts had to participate remotely because of possible exposure to the virus. And while Democrats wore masks, some Republicans went without, a sign of the increasingly political debate over how to handle the pandemic.
Staying at home indefinitely is not the solution to this pandemic. There is not enough money available to help all those hurt by a closed economy. All roads back to work and back to school lead through testing, tracking, isolation, treatment, and vaccines.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. has now caught up with other nations.
We've prevailed on testing.
Lawmakers receiving more detail on exactly what that capability will be.
So by September, taking every aspect of development, authorization, manufacturing, and supply chain into consideration, we project that our nation will be capable of performing at least 40 to 50 million tests per month.
Even as the U.S. economy gets up and running, the damage will be difficult to contain. Unemployment numbers are the worst in almost 100 years. But Senate Republicans are urging caution before Congress approves another round of aid.
We're taking a look at what we've already done. We've added about $3 trillion to the national debt and assessing the effectiveness of that before deciding to go forward.
Democrats say another massive infusion of cash is needed to help essential workers and to restart the U.S. economy.
We must think big for the people now, because if we don't, it will cost more in lives and livelihood later. Not acting is the most expensive course.
Their $3 trillion proposal set to pass the House later this week has no chance of clearing the Republican majority U.S. Senate. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump has largely avoided wearing masks despite the White House recently directing its West Wing staff to wear them in line with guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Meanwhile, for Americans, the decision to mask or not to mask is becoming a political statement in a brewing coronavirus culture war. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has our story.
Beginning this week, masks are mandatory for White House employees and visitors after more staff tested positive for the coronavirus, including Katie Miller, the Vice President's press secretary, and wife of White House senior advisor Stephen Miller. President Donald Trump said he was the one who made masks mandatory in the White House.
Well, if they're a certain distance from me or if they're a certain distance from each other, they do. In the case of me, I'm not close to anybody.
Trump has never worn a mask in public, including during his recent visit to a mask production facility. This is what he said last month.
I think wearing a face mask as I greet presidents, prime ministers, dictators, kings, queens, I don't know, somehow I don't see it for myself.
His concern is really about the visual propaganda of what it looks like for the President of the United States to be wearing a mask. I think to him it probably signals weakness.
In early April, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommended Americans use a cloth face covering to protect against the coronavirus.
When the vast majority of people actually do that, it does reduce the transmission of respiratory viruses. COVID and influenza. So it has a double benefit. But wearing the mask is absolutely the most important thing you can do to reduce the transmission.
Unlike in some Asian countries where masks are commonly worn for health reasons, many in the U.S. are not accustomed to wearing them. A recent poll shows 79% of Democrats wear masks in public compared to 59% of Republicans. Suggesting the decision on masks may be influenced by politics, the same politics that drive some Americans to rally against lockdown orders in protests that have been supported by Trump on Twitter. The same group is more likely to believe conspiracy theories that the virus and its mitigation effort is a hoax to bring down Trump. The polarization of public health is a continuation of partisanship that has been deepening in past decades, says Jennifer Masicha.
People who've been prepared for 20, 30 years to understand the world as an us versus them struggle are looking for cues that signal, what is our side's position versus what is their side's position. And so it's really unfortunate that, public safety is at risk because of a partisan agenda.
Trump's mask avoidance has been criticized, including by Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who said the president should be setting an example for Americans during this deadly pandemic. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
In our tech report, a Kenyan social enterprise School for Schools seeks to empower university students with digital tools and resources through the provision of affordable laptop computers. The company is trying to develop innovative ways to cope with COVID-19. School for Schools offers a financing plan that is bundled into student tuition fees to assist students who cannot otherwise afford the full upfront payment of a laptop. Africa 54's Paul Ndiho spoke to Sangay Olekenga, the Chief Executive Officer of School for Schools.
Hello, Mr. Sankey Kenga. Welcome to Africa 54. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So thank you so much for having me.
What is School for Schools about?
We're a digital access program that enables university students to get access to devices and tools such as laptops that they may otherwise not be able to afford it. We are kind of breaking down a major problem of access by enabling these students to more or less bridge this gap.
How do you get these laptops? Do you have funding? Do you use your own resources to buy these laptops for schools?
If you provide this on your own, it becomes very expensive. But if you bring partners on board to solve this particular problem, it becomes much easier. We bring together manufacturers who give us subsidized devices, and that's the likes of Microsoft, Dell, Lenovo, etc. And we bring in banks, like Stanbic Bank is one of our partners here. And now the local universities who are pretty much our customers. You're able to offer these students this device almost like a loan. So it makes it cheaper for a parent to afford. And pay for it over the period of time the students are in school for.
Now that the schools are closed as a result of COVID-19, how has this impacted your program?
It's impacted us in a big way because you can imagine now you're trying to solve a problem for students who are not in school. Like, for example, these terms repayments have become very difficult. Some of the parents who had picked up the laptop, they're just saying, you need to give us a bit of time to see how to put these resources together. And obviously that has an impact on our cash flow in some ways. We've had to put quite a number of our staff on leave just because, there's really nothing much to do. On the other hand, it is also kind of presented us with some kind of opportunities in that the distance learning has become something that most of now the universities are embracing. It's a very tough environment, especially for parents, because they have to figure out quite a bit. You can imagine if you're not a tech-savvy parent and you're being asked to download this particular app or you need to have these minimum specifications for a particular hardware device for your child to be able to get through this e-learning experience. It's a new normal that I think we are all trying to embrace. In some respect, of course, it has meant that I've had to deal with parents on one-on-one basis. So being able to, it's a very interesting learning experience. There's a lot that we're learning through these challenges, and I believe we'll come out of it a bit more stronger.
How about in the context of people not having internet? How are you serving those people?
We've managed to kind of get into partnership with some of our telcos to provide subsidized internet bundles. One of the greatest advantages in being in Kenya is connectivity. Kenya, I think, has among the best connectivity in Africa, if I'm not wrong. We are partnering right now with Telecom Kenya. And what we've done is that as opposed to the typical commercial bundle that you would buy for a certain particular price, we subsidize it for you. So that's how we've tried to bridge that gap. So I think it's kind of brought a bit of innovation in a sense, because now everybody has been forced to work in this new normal.
Speaking about innovation, are people coming up with great ideas that are geared towards solving some of these pressing challenges that we see as a result of COVID-19?
I have seen amazing, a lot of amazing innovations, especially to do with hygiene, like places to go wash your hands, and you can see that yes, we may not have the first world country resources, but we are very ingenious in how we go about solving our problems. Like you've seen, suddenly we are able to produce our own PPE materials, something that we thought we have to import. I think in a way this has been a blessing in disguise.
Mr. Kenga, I love your optimism. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
That was Africa 54's Paul Ndiho speaking to Sangay Olekenga, the Chief Executive Officer of Cool for Schools in Nairobi, Kenya. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.